Thanks, Ray and Tracy, for having me here today. iTrace has really been probably one of the most interesting devices I've worked with over the last couple of years. I really use it in a lot of different ways, but today we're going to talk about premium IOL screening using the iTrace and using angle alpha and corneal quality to help us make our decisions about what type of refractive IOL we should use. So the first question is, what is angle alpha D? And why are we concerned about it? So angle alpha D is actually a relationship of the center of the eye to the patient's line of sight. And why that's important is the fact that most IOLs are going to center on the center of the eye and not on the center of the pupil and not on the center of the line of sight. So you can physically try to place a lens in the bag on the line of sight, but as most of us who have done multifocal IOLs over many years have experienced, all of a sudden patients decenter and their vision drops 2 lines, and it's because we've missed the fact that the lens is not going to stay centered on the line of where you put it. It's going to go to the center of the eye. So when evaluating patients for multifocals, EDOF, accommodative IOLs, we really need to pay really close attention to this. We have to look at angle alpha and we have to look at its relationship to angle kappa, which is actually the difference between the center of the pupil and the patient's line of sight. So here we have a patient. Of course, it's a family member that came in, and she wants to have extended range of vision, but this is her first eye, it's her right eye. And as you can see, angle alpha D is 0.581 down here, red number. So the nice thing on iTrace is the fact that they sort of pre-flag things for you. Green is always really good, yellow is okay, and red means you better be really careful. So in this patient, you can see that here's the center of the eye, and over here is the line of sight. And the issue is, and the line of sight is actually the center of the pupil, so it's misleading to think, oh, this patient's line of sight is right on the center of the pupil. But the concern is really the fact that if I go and put a multifocal lens in this patient, there's a real chance that they may not have good vision. So the question is, what would you do? So let me ask you guys, what would you do? All right. Well, in these patients, again, why do I steer clear? So most of the multifocals available in the United States, the central zone is between 0.8 and 0.9 millimeters. So if you split that in half, it's 0.45. So that's as much decentration as you can have to not have a problem. The issue is that if angle alpha D and angle kappa are misaligned, you don't want their line of sight falling in one of those echelettes, because if it falls in the echelette, you're going to have significant drop in vision and the patient's going to complain about all kinds of aberrations. With EDOF lenses, you do have more tolerance. The central zone is actually 1.4 millimeters, but again, this lens uses some negative spherical aberration, and so with negative spherical aberration lenses, you also have to be a little bit careful about centration, because if you get off by 0.5 millimeter, again, you're going to wind up with some degradation of vision. So in this patient, I went ahead and put a true line toric in her, and as you can see, on axis. The only problem is, after surgery, the patient's vision was J7 for near. She had very happy with her distance vision, but her near vision wasn't what she was expecting. In all these patients, for crystal lens users, I've gone now to using CTRs to really try to avoid vaults and Z syndromes, and that definitely has helped, but accommodation isn't great, as most of you know. So now she wants her second eye done. So here we go. So now we're falling into more of we're within the 0.5 millimeter on angle alpha and angle kappa. So they're actually lining up a little bit closer together. And in this eye, she wants to have a little bit better near vision. So what would you do? So I'm a little hesitant about like a true multifocal, because she's really like right at that edge for, she might wind up in an echelette on a true multifocal. So I went ahead and put a symphony toric in this eye. And I don't have a problem mixing and matching, especially for the non-dominant eye. This lens works actually very well, and the patients don't really differentiate too much. And she wound up being a 20/20 J3 by doing that. So now we get to our post-refractive patients. And for many years, I was actually really scared about using multifocals and extended depth of lenses in my patients that were post-LASIK, because I didn't really have the tools to really understand. Just from having topography, you really can't tell the whole story. And we would have patients, when we tried putting multifocals in our post-LASIK patients, and definitely not in the post-RK patients. I'll show you why. But we had a lot of problems with that because we weren't really analyzing the whole cornea and understanding corneal aberrations. So here's a post-LASIK patient that we had, and a couple things that are important to analyze for post-refractive patients. Number one, we want to pay really close attention to their corneal hyoaberrations. So corneal hyoaberrations, this is on the IOL analysis screen. So it's the only place you're going to find it in your main screen. It's not going to be on the Chang analysis. But we have to go to the IOL analysis screen to look at our corneal hyoaberrations. And as you can see, she's got 0.08. Her angle alpha is certainly pretty good at 0.3. So she's well-centered ablation. She has very little hyoaberrations, very little aberration in her cornea. But what's important is actually now to look at the MTF curves. So what you want to differentiate is whether or not you have a patient that's got a poor quality cornea with low MTFs versus a good quality cornea. And here you can see that she's got excellent quality of vision in her cornea, and her vision decline is all related to her lens. So in this kind of case, I really don't have a problem going with an extended depth of focus lens, and that's exactly what I did. Now, who do you want to stay away from? So this is a patient now, if you look at the corneal aberrations, oh, sorry, let me back up. So here you can see now we're approaching that 0.2, which is when you start to get to higher levels of corneal aberration, you really want to steer clear of multifocal IOLs. But in this patient, so this is one patient, I just want to sort of illustrate the fact. What's key in these post-RK patients is the fact that not only do they have high corneal aberrations, but their MTF curves drop significantly. So if you go and put a lens in that's going to affect contrast sensitivity, you're going to worsen their vision. You really, really need to steer clear. So in post-RK patients, I really don't want to ever put any type of multifocal lens. If somebody wants something, I'm going to usually use a toric lens or an accommodating lens, or just a traditional monofocal, depending on what their symptoms are. Okay, so now you have your dry eye patient that comes in with corneal Salzmann's nodules, and they want some kind of premium IOL. So here's our patient pre-debridement. So in all these patients, if I have a dry eye patient with Salzmann's nodules, I really want to take care of their cornea before I do cataract surgery. I also want to reevaluate them after I've removed the nodule. So I'll wait. You have to be patient with these patients. You have to tell them they're going to need to wait a month to 3 months before the cornea is stable before you can go ahead and do surgery. So here you can see, obviously, that the patient has changes here from the nodules, and post-debridement, we've actually made the cornea a little bit more spherical now. So now the patient actually wants to have a premium IOL. Her husband's an ophthalmologist who I did an extended depth of focus lens on both eyes, but she also wants something. However, if we pay really close attention to her, where did we go? Let's see. We go ahead and now do our post-analysis after the debridement, and we find that she has actually a marginal corneal hyoaberrations, but she also now has a high angle alpha. So in this patient with dry eye and a marginal corneal hyoaberration, who we debrided, the question is, what are you going to do? So she's got high angle alpha, she's got marginal corneal aberrations. Just because her husband has an extended depth of focus lens doesn't mean that's what you're going to do for her. So I actually had to talk her out of it. I want to be conservative in these kind of cases. She's got dry eye to begin with. She actually had a botched LASIK on one of her eyes that she didn't have treatment, but she's got a corneal scar. So in this kind of case, I decided let's just go with a traditional standard monofocal IOL. And I think that that's the safest bet for the patient. So in summary, use your iTrace, get to know it. It's really a great tool for helping you separate what you can do for any given patient. Thank you.